In the starlit hall of the Cranary Imperial Palace, Empress Kaela walked alone, her slender fingers grazing the crystalline columns that flanked her path. Yet her thoughts were far from solitude. Countless centuries of Cranary rule had passed before her ascension, and from the very moment she was declared empress, Kaela had inherited the empire's most formidable trait, the ability to see into the countless possible futures. Though each Cranary possessed a limited form of this precognition, only the empress could peer deeply across millennia of branching timelines and twisted destinies, discerning the best course to secure her people's ascendance. Her golden eyes gleamed with the power of her line, that luminous gift bestowed upon her dynasty by ancient cosmic forces. She was young, by Cranary standards, just a few hundred years, and yet she carried in her mind centuries upon centuries of visions. Tonight, those visions coalesced into a single, confounding image, a man, a human from Earth, standing at the threshold of her empire's destiny. She had seen him in every crucial juncture, in every variant of the future that would decide the fate of the Cranary. He was not especially tall nor imposing, at least not in the glimpses she perceived. Dark hair, troubled eyes, a face that held scars earned from some harsh life, and a name that rang through her mind like a half-forgotten melody, Jaren. No matter how Kaela peered further into the threads of time, Jaren's presence remained. He was a fixed point amid the swirling vortex of potentialities, and nothing she did would erase him from the Cranary's path, even if the visions grew dimmer whenever he appeared. Already, that was unusual. The Empress, in her prescient capacity, was hardly ever so obstructed. When she tried to see beyond the presence of this man, the otherwise clear tapestry of time became strangely clouded. In some versions, he appeared as a hero, forging alliances across the galaxy. In others, he was a rogue who walked alone through cosmic storms, refusing to bow to any empire or dominion. Kaela's heart surged with unease. Here was a mortal from a relatively minor star system, unremarkable when measured against the Cranary's thousand-planet empire. Yet, in the cosmic scheme, he shone like a living paradox. The Empress stood at the palace's main balcony, gazing out at the capital city, Talareen, spread below in glittering splendor. Towers of living crystal soared into the starry sky, each tower illuminated by the grand glow of 1,000 carefully curated energy lamps. Far in the distance, beyond the city's graceful perimeter, lay the ancient labyrinth known as the Oracle's Maze, where the founders of the Cranary had once trod to commune with the higher powers that guided them. Kaela considered venturing there, in the hush of night, to see if the maze might provide any further clarity on this human. She closed her eyes, letting the cool cosmic wind brush across her face, her form draped in shimmering silks of imperial violet. In her mind, she saw all the shapes of possible futures. An attempt to exile the human from Cranary territory always ended in chaos, with entire star lanes collapsing into paradox. An attempt to befriend him led to fleeting glimpses of a bright alliance, but also a deeper, murky threat. Something monstrous lurked behind all these swirling visions, a power that sought to devour entire timelines, a cosmic hunger that threatened the empire itself. Though determined, Kaela felt a momentary pang of fear. She had never encountered a vision that confounded her so thoroughly. No matter her vantage point or her moment of focus, Jaren's involvement distorted and blocked her usual clarity. If she was to safeguard the Cranary Empire from the storms on the horizon, she would need to deal with this man directly. Had she known precisely where to find him, she would have dispatched her imperial seekers already, but the visions only told her that soon, a chain of events would bring him out of the swirling mosaic. depositing him right on the threshold of Talareen. All she could do was prepare, gather her advisors, and wait. That was the fate that hung over the empire, shimmering and uncertain. She let a single tear roll down her cheek, not of sadness but of resolve, before turning on her heel and heading back into the palace's warm interior. Tomorrow, she would begin the search for Jaren in earnest, summoning her most trusted warlords, scientists, and oracles. Whether he was friend or foe remained to be discovered. But for now, the Empress could only see a single unchangeable fact. The future of the Chronari would hinge on this unexpected visitor, and, in time, all would be revealed. Far from the imperial spires of Talareen, aboard a battered starship coasting through the bleak emptiness between recognized trade routes, Jaren Hawthorne stood at the helm, adjusting the scavenged flight instruments that barely held his craft together. Ever since he was a boy on the frontier world known as Tadeus IV, Jaren had dreamed of escaping the humdrum existence thrust upon him and charting his own path through the unknown. He had accomplished that dream and more, but at a severe cost. His ship, the Silver Dawn, was a relic from a chaotic era of human expansion, its hull pocked by debris collisions, scarred by near-fatal encounters with pirates, and patched over countless times. Even so, the Silver Dawn flew with a certain defiant elegance, as though it possessed a spirit equal to the man who piloted it. Jaren's clothing was as worn as his craft leather boots, a threadbare jacket, and a single shining data gauntlet, all testaments to a life of perpetual motion. He remembered the exact moment he realized his life had taken a strange turn. It was after an encounter in the Rift Nebula, when an anomaly threatened to tear his starship apart. Yet somehow, against all odds, reality had seemed to bend around him, preserving him. He had walked away from that catastrophic event with no explanation and only a rising suspicion that something about him, or within him, was out of sync with the rest of the cosmos. In the months since, Jaren had noticed odd coincidences, phenomena that made no rational sense. Electronic sensors scrambled whenever he was too close, star maps flickered uncertainly on the displays, and in his dreams, he saw fleeting images of swirling timelines, permutations that both beckoned and warned him away. He was, by nature, no scholar. His path to adulthood had been shaped by a pragmatic father and an austere frontier environment, but he had gleaned enough to suspect he was at the center of something bigger than he could comprehend. He glanced at the nav computer. The coordinates were as improbable as a gambler's dice throw, leading him to the outer fringes of Chronari space. Jaren knew of the Chronari, for all spacefaring civilizations did. The Chronari Empire, with its centuries of expansion and rumored precognitive abilities, was both revered and feared. By all accounts, their empress could see possible futures, though the legends twisted with each retelling. Some said she could read hearts like open books, while others claimed her eyes could reveal the moment of a person's death. A beeping from the console snapped him from his ruminations. A blockade of Chronari defense satellites had suddenly come online. His presence was detected. A flurry of red lights lit up the cockpit as advanced sensors from some hidden station reached out to scan the Silver Dawn. In an instant, the entire region of space that had seemed so empty now bristled with potential hostility. Jaren let out a quiet sigh. He had never meant to trespass or provoke the Chronari, but he was no fool, either. He knew each star system near the Chronari domain was meticulously monitored, and that crossing certain invisible boundaries could trigger automated defense measures. Still, he had followed an instinct, an intangible nudge that guided him here, as though his very presence was required. With nimble fingers, He keyed in a code sequence he had acquired under ethically questionable circumstances from a renegade merchant near the rim. If the code was recognized, it might grant him passage. If not, he would soon be reduced to stardust in the vacuum of space. A few tense moments passed. Then, surprisingly, the satellites powered down their weapon systems, allowing him to proceed. Relief mingled with uncertainty. What forces were at work that he, a lone wanderer, should be granted safe passage into the most secretive realm of the Chronari Empire? He set his jaw, feeling a subtle flutter in his chest, a sensation that something beyond the immediate was guiding him. Before he could ponder further, a voice crackled over the comlink, smooth and resonant. Vessel Silver Dawn. You have entered restricted Chronari space. Adjust your heading to vector 113.7 and proceed to Talarine at a controlled speed. Any deviation shall be met with lethal force. Jaren's lips twitched. Of course, the Chronari would not welcome him with open arms. Yet that they had not shot him down on sight meant they were expecting him, or at least curious enough to see what might happen. He steeled himself, checked the instruments, and complied, as the engines rumbled, carrying him closer to the seat of Chronari power. Jaren wondered if he was traveling into captivity, or if this was the beginning of a fate he had once glimpsed out of the corner of his eye. Somewhere within the silver dawn, an old star map flickered again, refusing to stay locked on the known charts, shifting instead to display strange arcs of cosmic geometry. Jaren eyed the glitch, then sighed, focusing on the path ahead. If the Chronari wanted to speak to him, he would let them speak. He was as ready as he could be, though a sense of destiny, as palpable as static electricity, filled the cramped cockpit. In the darkness beyond his canopy, the stars shimmered, looking almost alive, as though infinite eyes peered back at him. Jaren had no illusions about how dangerous the Chronari Empire could be, but danger had never stopped him before. The command to land on Talarine was both a summons and a challenge, and in his mind, he resolved to find out why. Meanwhile, the presence that guided the Chronari Empress's visions stirred, unbeknownst to him. The threads of probability were weaving themselves into an unbreakable tapestry. Everything that had brought Jaren here, his unnatural survival, his near-mystical ability to disrupt sensors, his run-ins with the cosmic anomalies, was converging on a single moment in time. A moment that would change the course of history for both humanity and the Chronari Empire. Night had fallen over Talarine, draping the capital city in deep purples, with the luminous lights of Chronari architecture forming arcs of glow across the skyline. In the far distance, Empress Kaela's personal flyer glided silently away from the palace and toward the Oracle's maze. Only a handful of personal attendants and security drones accompanied her, for the maze was a sacred place, rarely visited by outsiders, even among the Chronari. The maze had existed on Talarine since before any living Chronari could remember. Legend said it was built in a time when the Empire was a single colony, forging its identity amidst cosmic wonders. The Empress's ancestors had discovered that within the maze's twisting corridors of crystal and stone, the flow of time itself was heightened, enabling oracles to glimpse crucial truths. Now, Kaela hoped it would once again grant her clarity, for her mind was unsettled, riddled with conflicting visions of a future that might dissolve into cosmic ruin. She emerged from her flyer and walked alone across a small bridge, spanning a still pool of midnight blue water. The reflection of the planet's twin moons floated in that pool, wavering gently. Kaela's attendants paused at the entrance, for beyond that threshold, only the Empress could proceed. She placed her hand on a carved stone pillar, feeling the ancient runes that thrummed beneath her fingertips. Then she stepped inside. Instantly, She felt the presence of countless echoes swirling around her, a tapestry of shadows cast by possible futures. The maze was not a labyrinth in the conventional sense, it was a dimensional space that defied geometry. Corridors curved back onto themselves. Ramps rose at impossibly steep angles. Mirrors of polished crystal reflected illusions that flickered between states of existence. A lesser mind might be undone by the confusion, but Kaela walked with careful purpose, chanting a mental litany to keep her sense of direction intact. She reached a central chamber after what felt like hours, though, in truth, it might have been mere moments. There, a pool of softly glowing liquid known as the Eye of Ura lay before her, radiating gentle heat. The Empress knelt, placing both hands upon the rim of the basin, gazing into that milky substance that shimmered with faint currents. This was the heart of the maze. Here, she could focus her prescient power, pulling at the threads of the future in search of answers. For a time, she saw only a swirl of luminous shapes. Then came a flicker of clarity. Jaren, stepping off his ship, meeting her gaze in the throne room. Possibly. She watched as he reached out to her with a hesitant hand. Then the vision dissolved. Another flickered. Jaren, standing side by side with her at a dais, as though making some grave pronouncement to assembled Chronari nobility. Then it vanished into haze. A third vision materialized, more ominous. She saw lines of black shadow creeping through the cosmos, devouring entire star systems like a sentient, all-consuming void. The Chronari fleets were battered, disoriented by the sudden collapse of the timelines they normally navigated with ease. She saw glimpses of a figure robed in dark energy, eyes ablaze with malevolent power, laughing as the fabric of reality frayed. And yet, amid that maelstrom, Jaren's presence shone like an anchor, refusing to yield to the chaos. Kaela trembled, sweat forming on her brow. This last scene echoed with a strange resonance that told her it was not merely a vision, but a warning. Something, or someone, sought to undermine the Chronari's greatest strength, their prescience, by unraveling time itself. That was no trifling matter. Chronari oracles had long debated the possibility that time could be collapsed by a sufficiently potent force. But now, it seemed more than a theoretical threat. She felt the Eye of Ura respond to her agitation, heating her palms. Compelled by an inner need, she uttered a question, her voice echoing in the chamber. Who dares to sunder time? In answer, the glowing liquid rippled, forming an image of a proud Chronari face, one Kaela recognized all too well, Lord Vorinth, an influential noble who had once vied for the throne. He had retreated to a far corner of the empire after Kaela's ascension, rumored to be dabbling in forbidden experiments. If these visions held true, he had gone beyond mere conspiracies and was now tampering with the fabric of existence. Kaela exhaled slowly, dread mingling with grim resolve. She could not ignore the threat posed by Vorinth, a cunning and ambitious figure who, if possessed of a device or knowledge capable of breaking the time stream, would pose an even graver danger than any outside empire. But the Eye of Ura hinted at a solution. Jaren, somehow, that human was tied to the timeline's stability, perhaps the only being able to counter the catastrophic unraveling that Vorinth intended. With caution, she rose. Her reflection in the eye's surface was that of a resolute leader, an empress willing to do whatever was necessary to preserve her people. In that reflection, she thought she saw the faint flicker of Jaren's silhouette standing behind her, as though their destinies were now intertwined. The moment passed, and the maze around her shimmered with ancient energies. She turned away, navigating her steps back through the twisting corridors. The knowledge she had gleaned weighed upon her like a mantle of thunderclouds. There would be no turning aside from this path. to preserve the Cronari Empire and all the worlds connected to its luminous guidance. She must either forge an alliance with the human named Jaren or risk seeing her empire devoured by darkness. Outside, her attendants waited anxiously, and though they dared not ask what she had learned, her expression told them enough. At that moment, the star-laden sky above Talareen felt both endless and fragile, as though a single cosmic thread could unravel it all. Yet Kaela's stride remained confident. Her next step would be to confirm Jaren's arrival and bring him to her presence. The future, every possible version of it, might hinge on what happened next. The silver dawn descended toward Talareen under the watchful gaze of Cronari defense platforms, each one a masterwork of architectural splendor. Jaren craned his neck to see the city's skyline below, a sea of crystalline towers twisting gracefully into the night. Beam lights danced in sweeping arcs, illuminating grand boulevards where Cronari citizens walked in elegant attire. He felt a curious mixture of awe and foreboding. In his youth, he had once seen a partial holo documentary about the Cronari capital, but it had been mere fragments. Now, confronted with its living reality, he was acutely aware of the Empire's staggering sophistication and of his own ship's battered state. The flight controller's voice guided him to a landing pad, perched high above the city's primary thoroughfares, a place reserved for official or extremely special visitors. As the landing gear touched down, a sudden hush enveloped the cockpit. The ship's engines whirred into standby. Jaren took a moment to steady himself. He could sense that something monumental was about to occur. He reached down, checking the hidden compartments on his person, where he kept small but potent means of self-defense, a compact pulse pistol, a vibro knife. He hoped he would not need them, but a life of constant wandering had taught him never to appear too vulnerable. When he lowered the boarding ramp, he was met by a retinue of Cronari guards in ceremonial attire. Their uniforms were violet and gold, with swirling patterns reminiscent of the fractal geometry that adorned Cronari star maps. Each guard carried a slender staff, which glowed at one end, presumably doubling as a spear-like energy weapon. Standing at the center of this procession was a tall Cronari official, wearing an ornate headdress, who stepped forward in a gesture of welcome. "Jaren Hawthorne," the official said, inclining his head slightly. "By the Empress's command, we bid you welcome to Talareen. Your presence has been foretold." Jaren felt a quiver run through him at those words. Had they truly expected him? He inclined his head in return, forcing a respectful tone. "I come in peace, as a traveler. I hope my arrival is not an inconvenience." The official gave him a measured look. "Indeed, you have piqued our interest, and our Empress desires an audience. Please, follow us." With that, the guards stepped into formation, flanking Jaren as they led him through an ornate gateway into the labyrinthine corridors that would take them to the palace's main complex. Jaren let his gaze wander, noting the high archways, the carved reliefs of Cronari history, the fluid lines that shaped every wall and corner. The air bore the faint scent of exotic blossoms, perhaps from some hidden garden. Every so often, they passed an alcove where Cronari technology hummed quietly. Jaren, with a practiced eye, recognized energy relays, data conduits, advanced scanning apparatuses. He had salvaged bits and pieces of Cronari tech before, but seeing it all integrated and functioning seamlessly was a sobering reminder of how advanced this empire truly was. At last, they reached a grand antechamber, where pillars of crystallized quartz spiraled upward to a domed ceiling that shimmered with embedded star maps. Dozens of Cronari courtiers and functionaries milled about, their eyes lingering on Jaren with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. He swallowed hard, feeling a twinge of unease at being the subject of so much scrutiny. Then the official leading him spoke to a pair of heavily armored guards, who stood before a set of engraved doors. The doors themselves seemed to respond to the official's voice, sliding open in a silent, fluid motion. Beyond them, a long corridor extended toward what must be the throne room. Jaren's stomach tightened. As they continued, the corridor's design grew more elaborate, culminating in a set of carved arches that glittered with embedded gemstones. Jaren noticed swirling patterns that seemed to depict constellations, but these were not any constellations he recognized. At least, not from standard Earth charts. Could they be the star patterns of the Chronary home system, or some representation of quantum space? He had little time to reflect, for the official gestured for him to step forward into the throne room. He entered a vast, oval-shaped hall bathed in soft violet light. At the far end, elevated on a dais of polished crystal, sat Empress Kaela herself, draped in regal vestments of shimmering silver and deep purple. A slender circlet crowned her head, from which a single gem glowed with an inner fire. Her golden eyes fixed upon Jaren, radiating an intensity that made him swallow reflexively. He sensed something in her gaze, something far beyond normal comprehension, as though she could peer into the hidden layers of his very being. A hush fell over the assembled courtiers. The official bowed low and announced in a clear voice, "Your Radiance, I present to you Jaren Hawthorne, the one whose arrival you have foreseen." Kaela inclined her head, her expression poised, regal, and inscrutable. She looked at Jaren for what felt like an eternity. Then she spoke, her voice soft yet resonating with underlying authority. "So, we meet at last. You come at a pivotal moment." Jaren dared to take a step forward, even as the guards tensed. He bowed his head, mindful that he was in the presence of a sovereign. "I didn't intend to trespass. I've come because, somehow, I felt called here. I don't know why." The Empress rose from her throne, descending the dais with graceful steps. As she approached, the courtiers whispered among themselves, evidently not used to such directness. She stopped a mere arm's length from Jaren, her eyes locked onto his. "Your presence is woven through our futures, Jaren. We cannot see beyond the paths that converge around you, and that is troubling for one who sees." He nodded slowly, heart pounding. "I've sensed strange things happening around me. It's like I interfere with normal readings, normal scans. I don't know if it's a threat or—" She lifted a hand gently, stopping his words. "We do not yet fully understand it either. But your being here is crucial, for not all is well in the Empire. There are powers at work that seek to warp time itself. And you, Jaren Hawthorne, appear to be a stabilizing force." Those words sent a chill through him. He had guessed he was different, but to hear her so plainly state it was another matter. Behind her, the flicker of the throne room's luminous architecture seemed almost alive, as though reacting to her presence. "Allow me to learn more," she continued, her voice tinged with a hint of urgency. "Submit to a harmless scanning by my oracles. Then we shall learn what role you are destined to play." Jaren hesitated. Surrendering himself to imperial scrutiny was not in his nature, but the sense of cosmic significance pressing upon him was undeniable. He looked around, seeing no immediate alternative. This was the moment he had somehow been propelled toward all these months, maybe years. Lowering his head in cautious acceptance, he said, "All right, I'll agree to your scan. On one condition, I want your assurance that I won't be kept here against my will." A faint smile curved the Empress's lips. "Agreed. We have no desire to make you a prisoner. Jaren, the fates seem to bind us together, for good or ill. At that, Kaela waved a graceful hand, and from a side corridor, a group of robed Chronari oracles appeared, their eyes glittering with the same golden hue that denoted strong precognitive gifts. As they drew near, Jaren felt a subtle tug on his consciousness, like an invisible wind stirring the edges of his mind. Despite his anxiety, he tried to stay calm, for he understood that from this moment on, his life would never be the same. Standing in that grand hall, under the watchful eyes of an entire alien court, he allowed the oracles to begin their scan. The swirling energies within the throne room intensified, and in that charged moment, Jaren realized that the path he now walked would lead him far beyond the frontier life he once knew, onto a cosmic stage where entire timelines might hang in the balance. In the hush of a secluded chamber deep within the palace, the oracles conducted their examination. Jaren stood in the center of a circular platform, etched with glowing runes that flickered like captive lightning. Surrounding him, 6 robed Chronari oracles chanted softly, their voices weaving together into a pattern reminiscent of a cosmic chorus. Empress Kaela observed from a raised balcony, her thoughts a whirl of curiosity and caution. She did not relish placing Jaren at the mercy of such an intense scrutiny, analyzing a being who seemed to reside at a nexus of probabilities posed its own dangers, but she could see no alternative. She needed the knowledge these oracles might glean. Slowly, the swirling energies converged upon Jaren. He felt them as a gentle pressure behind his eyes, a subtle resonance along his spine, as though his very cells were being recognized by the structure of the universe itself. A part of him wanted to fight the intrusion, to assert control, but he forced himself to remain still. The lead oracle, a pale-faced Chronari with eyes that glowed like miniature suns, stepped forward. His voice, low and resonant, filled the chamber. We sense a paradox. This human's timeline is curiously anchored, resistant to our usual perceptions. Where we would see branching futures, we encounter blank spaces. Where we would see a single mortal's path, we witness an echo across many planes. Another oracle added, in an awed whisper, it is as though reality itself circles around him, forming a tether that holds events in place. Kaela folded her hands, her nails digging slightly into her palms. She had surmised something like this, but to hear it confirmed gave her both relief and fresh apprehension. If Jaren indeed was an anchor, then Vorant's meddling with the time stream might be countered by him. But that implied Jaren's involvement was not merely important, but necessary. Jaren, meanwhile, felt the swirl of energies intensify, building to a crescendo that made the runes beneath his feet flare. For an instant, his vision went white. He felt himself pulled outward, as though glimpsing the chamber from a vantage point far above, seeing the entire city of Talareen from a vantage that transcended normal space. The moment passed in a heartbeat, yet it left him gasping for breath. When the energy subsided, the oracles stepped back, their expressions one of awe and anxiety. The lead oracle exchanged a look with Kaela, then spoke with trembling reverence. He is indeed an anomaly. We suspect that where others move through time, he is a constant. If time were to unravel, he would remain, potentially preserving or restabilizing what remains. In short, he is the key. A profound silence settled over the room. Jaren slumped slightly, catching his breath, while Kaela's golden gaze flickered with thought. The oracle's pronouncement lingered in the air, a verdict that demanded action. Then Kaela inclined her head, addressing both Jaren and the oracles. We must confirm this beyond doubt. If what you say is true, then we have a chance to avert the disaster I glimpsed in the maze. But we also risk drawing the attention of those who would exploit him or even harm him to destabilize the Chronari Empire. The oracles nodded in agreement, and Kaela's posture straightened, her demeanor shifting from introspection to command. She raised her voice slightly. Guards, escort Jaren to our secure quarters. Provide him every courtesy. He is not our prisoner, but we cannot allow him to roam freely until we grasp the full implications of this discovery. Jaren frowned, but inclined his head. I appreciate your hospitality, he said, trying to keep his tone respectful. He had little doubt that any attempt to slip away would be futile. Not with the Chronari's advanced surveillance technology and Kaela's own precognitive senses. Two guards stepped forward, politely yet firmly guiding Jaren out of the chamber. Kaela watched him go, her chest tightening. An anchor for reality, somehow the very notion unsettled her in a way that no cosmic threat ever had. She must secure an alliance with him, earn his trust, ensure his safety, or risk losing the only bulwark against the dark tide Vorinth seemed poised to unleash. When Jaren disappeared from sight, Kaela turned her attention to the oracles. Speak plainly, she commanded, her voice echoing in the chamber. What do we do next? The lead oracle exchanged glances with his fellows. We must gather more information about Lord Vorinth's activities, your radiance. If indeed he is seeking to collapse or remake the time stream, we must know how. As for the human, he must be protected and trained, if that is even possible. Trained, Kaela echoed, arching a delicate brow. The energies swirling around him are not merely passive. We sense a potential for him to shape them, though unconsciously. If that power remains untapped, it might be turned against him or allow Vorinth to siphon it for his own ends. Kaela sighed softly, stepping down from the balcony. She stood amid the runic platform, feeling the residual heat of the oracle's scan. Then we have little time to waste. I will speak with Jaren personally, attempt to make him understand the gravity of his role. Meanwhile, you must discover Vorinth's location and determine how he intends to carry out this monstrous plan. The oracles bowed, their robes sweeping across the glowing rooms. One by one, they exited, their expressions grim, alone in the chamber. Kaela closed her eyes, quieting her racing thoughts. She realized that for all her centuries of training and her imperial birthright, the future now hinged on an outsider, a lone human wanderer who had fallen, or perhaps been drawn, into her realm. Some might call it destiny. Kaela, however, understood the stakes in painfully concrete terms. If Vorinth succeeded in sabotaging the timelines, entire star systems, and with them, the Chronari Empire could be lost to oblivion. The Empress could not allow that. She would do everything in her power, use every gift at her disposal, to ensure that Jaren's presence led to salvation rather than ruin. As she left the chamber, she could almost sense the labyrinth of possible futures swirling overhead. She tried to pierce the veil around them, but the moment she reached for clarity, she felt the same obfuscation that had plagued her visions before. Something about Jaren both illuminated and occluded the path forward, forcing her to rely on more than mere prescience. Perhaps trust, cooperation, and courage would be required in ways that even she, the Empress, had yet to fully embrace. High above the palace, the twin moons of Talarine continued their stately dance, casting pale radiance over a world that teetered on the brink of a cosmic turning point. If the Chronari had once believed themselves masters of time's currents, they now stood humbly aware of how little they truly controlled, and in a secure chamber, Jaren Hawthorne, an unwitting anchor of reality, stared out at the alien skyline, his thoughts already roaming far beyond the walls that held him, trying to grasp the enormity of what he had just learned. On the far reaches of the Cronary Empire, Lord Vorinth paced through a hidden laboratory, his dark robes trailing across polished floors etched with forbidden runes. A cluster of Cronary scientists, all sworn to his cause or bound by threats, labored at crystalline consoles, monitoring streams of data that pulsed with eerie light. Outside, the swirling dust of an abandoned mining world lent an air of desolation to the horizon, reflecting the secrecy of their endeavors. Vorinth's features were unmistakably Cronary refined bone structure. Golden eyes, but the glimmer in those eyes hinted at a fierce obsession. Years ago, he had challenged Kaela's ascension, claiming that his lineage possessed a superior right to the throne. The Imperial Council, after examining the futures, had unanimously supported Kaela, leaving Vorinth fuming. He retreated to his remote estate and began dabbling in knowledge gleaned from the darkest corners of Cronary archives. He paused before a massive device that dominated the center of the laboratory, a twisted sculpture of metal coils, focusing crystals, and humming power generators. Pale arcs of energy danced between the coils, forming shapes that seemed alive. With a triumphant smirk, Vorinth rested a hand on the device's control panel, feeling the surge of power resonate through his fingertips. One of his chief scientists, a jittery Cronary with sweat beading on his brow, approached timidly. "My lord, the energies we're harnessing are becoming unstable. The fractal matrix is nearing critical thresholds. We must calibrate further before attempting any major temporal distortion." Vorinth dismissed the warning with a wave. "We've come too far for cowardice. The Empire claims dominion over time, through their trivial glimpses of possibility. But I will accomplish what no empress ever dared. I will shape time to my will." A hush fell over the laboratory as the gathered workers exchanged worried glances. They knew that Vorinth's ambitions risked incalculable damage to the time stream, but they dared not openly rebel. To defy him was to invite death, or something far worse. Taking a deep breath, Vorinth closed his eyes and let his mind drift. Through grueling trials, he had gained limited prescience of his own, albeit an unstable version that hinged on stolen technology and unholy bargains with forces he only partially understood. He saw glimpses of futures in which Cronary society was undone, swallowed by paradox, while he himself rose as a godlike figure, ruling over the wreckage. The thought both thrilled and terrified him, for there was no guarantee that he could fully control the maelstrom he planned to unleash. Opening his eyes, he turned to the scientist. "What of the anomaly, the human anchor? Have our spies in Talarine confirmed his arrival?" The scientist consulted a data slate, a flicker of dread in his expression. "Yes, Lord Vorinth. They reported that he arrived under unknown circumstances and has been accepted into the imperial court. The Empress's oracles have scanned him." Vorinth's upper lip curled. He had suspected as much. "Then the Empress will soon learn what I already know, that the human's presence disrupts the usual chronal perceptions. A living tether in the sea of time." He stepped toward a side alcove, where a circular portal flickered with arcs of contained energy. This was a gateway, a prototype for forcibly manipulating the time stream. He had tested it on unsuspecting subjects, sending them spiraling into non-existent futures or forcing them to relive their past in endless loops, until their minds broke. Though horrifying, these experiments provided invaluable data. Pressing a switch, he activated a small screen above the portal. On it flickered an image of the Cronary capital, incomplete and hazy. "Kaela thinks she can outmaneuver me with her prescience," he muttered, speaking to the image. "But the presence of that human complicates everything. She might find a way to anchor the timeline, preventing me from unleashing the final collapse. Unless. He turned his gaze upon the device's swirling energies, eyes flashing with malevolent inspiration. Unless I capture him, harness his paradoxical nature, imagine it a power that can hold time in place, under my absolute control. Then, no future, no Empress, no cosmic force could defy me. The chief scientist trembled at the suggestion. To attempt such a direct manipulation of a living anchor might tear reality apart, my lord. Even with all our calibrations, the risk is unimaginable. Vorant's laugh echoed through the chamber, a cold, sharp sound. Do you think I care about the risks? This is the path to ascendancy. If we succeed, we shall rule time itself. He gestured at a group of armed mercenaries stationed near the exit. Prepare an infiltration team. I want them ready to depart for Talarine within the next cycle. Our sleeper agents in the capital must coordinate from inside. We will locate and seize the human, by force if necessary. The mercenaries saluted. Voranth returned his attention to the device, his mind racing with the possibilities. Soon, the Empire would tremble under the weight of his ambition, and if the Empress dared oppose him, he would ensure her precious prescience crumbled under the paradox he now intended to exploit. A faint alarm chimed at a console, indicating a minor fluctuation in the device's power distribution. The chief scientist rushed to contain it, while Voranth continued pacing, the arcs of temporal energy casting dancing shadows across his face. In his reflection on the polished floor, he saw both a conqueror and a madman, but in his heart, he believed that fortune favored the bold and the Kronari Empire would learn to bow, or it would be erased from history's tapestry altogether. Outside, the swirling dust devils of the mining world howled, as though echoing the turmoil within. Across the vast gulf of space, Talarine remained largely ignorant of the immediate threat, though the Empress's visions had provided warning enough to keep her watchful. The stage was set. Lord Voranth's next move would be brazen, a direct challenge to imperial authority and to the very laws of time. Under the roiling skies, the device hummed ominously, hungry for the final steps that would unleash it upon an unsuspecting universe. And in the quiet corners of his mind, Voranth imagined the look on Empress Kaela's face when she realized it was too late, that all her futures and her precious anchor were in his grasp. Such thoughts drew a satisfied smile to his lips. The game had truly begun. Empress Kaela found Jaren gazing out the window of his assigned quarters, his figure outlined by the glow of Talarine's cityscape. The room, lavish by most standards, still bore the unmistakable aura of being a gilded cage, albeit a comfortable one. When the door slid open, Jaren turned, his expression flickering between wariness and a budding sense of gratitude. She approached with measured steps, pausing a few feet away. I trust the accommodations are acceptable. My guards assure me you have been afforded the same comforts as an honored guest. He inclined his head. They have. I can't complain, although I realize I'm still being kept under close watch. Suppose I can't blame you, given everything. Kaela's gaze softened, in person, without the imposing presence of the entire court. She seemed more approachable. You are an enigma, Jaren. Until we understand the full breadth of your nature, caution is prudent. But I promise you no harm shall come to you under my watch. He studied her for a moment, then exhaled. I've spent my life drifting, picking up scraps of knowledge. But never did I dream I'd be singled out for something cosmic, something about anchoring the time stream. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Kaela nodded, stepping beside him so they both faced the window. The city's lights glittered below, reflecting off the endless towers. Time is fragile. The Chronari have always known this. Our gift, our prescience, comes from an ancient bond we share with the cosmic forces that shape reality. We see possibilities, weigh them, and choose paths that best serve our empire. But you, Jaren, exist beyond the scope of our vision. You appear in every path, yet remain hidden within the haze. You are both constant and unknown. He felt a chill, as though her words carried an electric undercurrent. If you want me to help, I'll listen. But how can I help if I don't fully understand what's happening? She regarded him thoughtfully, her golden eyes reflecting a quiet intensity. That is precisely why I came here to propose a more direct collaboration. We can share knowledge. I will provide you with what our oracles and scholars know of time's deeper layers. In exchange, I ask for your cooperation in discovering how you might consciously use your unique property. Jaren turned from the window, arms folded across his chest. And what if I say no? What if I just want to walk away? A faint sadness crossed her features. I would not force you. But do you truly think you could run from your own destiny? The moment you stepped into Chronari space, you became a focal point for forces far greater than either of us. My hope is that by working together, we might avert catastrophe. If you do nothing, Voranth's plan could succeed. And that would be disastrous, not only for the Empire, but potentially for all sentient life. The name made Jaren pause. He recalled hearing it in hushed whispers among the guards. Voranth. He's the one who's trying to collapse the timeline. Right, Kaela nodded gravely. Yes, he was once a noble of great standing, but his ambition ran too deep. Now he seeks to harness forbidden knowledge, to bend or break time itself. My oracles suspect he desires to supplant me as ruler of the Empire, rewriting the future to crown himself supreme. But such tampering would not merely overthrow a throne, it could unravel reality. Jaren scratched at the stubble on his jaw, weighing her words. So if I have this anchoring effect, maybe I can stop him. Or maybe he'll just come for me. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. He might. Indeed, I believe he will, if he learns that you have willingly sided with me. That's why we must train you, shield you. I cannot do this alone. Jaren, they stood in silence, the tension between them thick with the unspoken stakes at hand. At length, Jaren nodded. You've given me a choice that's really no choice at all. If the entire galaxy's in danger, I can't just walk away. I'll cooperate, but I need to know you're not just using me for the Empire's gain. Kaela placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of earnest sincerity. I swear it on my throne, my life. Whatever illusions you might hold about imperial arrogance, know that if time collapses, none of us will be spared. I do this not merely for Chronari glory, but for the survival of all, humanity included. He met her gaze, and for an instant, they shared an understanding that transcended words. Then he cleared his throat. All right, where do we start? Kaela took a breath, relieved. First, we should begin with the fundamental principles of Chronari prescience. Our empire has developed a framework for understanding the flow of timelines and how they intersect. If you can sense even a fraction of that, it might help you control whatever strange anomaly surrounds you. Then we'll consult the oracles again, under more controlled conditions, to see if you can direct your anchoring effect. She paused, her voice softening. And if at any point it becomes too overwhelming, tell me. I understand this is a tremendous burden, one you never asked for. His eyes flickered with gratitude. I appreciate that. It's been a long time since I trusted anyone, let alone an alien empress. But I can't deny what's happening. I'll do my best. They shared a moment of quiet solidarity, neither quite prepared for the gravity of their alliance, yet bound by necessity. Outside the windows, Talarine's luminous towers stood like silent witnesses, bathed in the glow of distant stars. It was a sight both beautiful and faintly haunting, a reminder that, beyond the city's grandeur, countless lives hung in the balance. When Kaela finally departed, she left Jaren with a set of data tablets containing initial lessons on chronary temporal theory. As he thumbed through them, he found himself strangely compelled by the alien symbols and conceptual diagrams. A sliver of excitement flickered in his chest. Perhaps he was, in some inexplicable way, meant for this. Within the palace halls, Kayla made her way to her private chambers, determination etched into her every step. There, she would confer with her most trusted advisors to accelerate the plan. For rumor had it that Vorinth was making moves. War might come soon, war fought not just with starships and armies, but with the very threads of time itself. Thus did the Empress and the Wanderer forge the beginnings of a partnership, one poised to challenge the darkest ambitions of a renegade lord, and perhaps alter the destiny of the multiverse in the process. Over the days that followed, Jaren found himself immersed in a rigorous regimen of learning and exploration. Under the watchful guidance of Kaela's chosen tutors, scholars, adept at chronary temporal science, he was introduced to concepts that made his head spin. They spoke of probability currents and chronal nodes, explaining that time was not a single linear river, but a vast network of tributaries, each one flowing and branching in response to choices, chance, and cosmic forces. Every morning, he was led to a specially designed training chamber, whose walls glimmered with embedded crystals arranged in elaborate fractal patterns. There, using advanced teaching devices, the chronari would project dynamic holo simulations of timelines, weaving illusions that surrounded Jaren with swirling lights and shapes, each color coded to represent different potential outcomes. At first, he struggled, overwhelmed by the sheer complexity. Where did one timeline end and the next begin? Why did certain events appear to overlap or even retroactively alter themselves? The tutors assured him that confusion was normal. Even chronari children, born with a rudimentary sense of prescience, took decades to fully grasp the intricacies of time's flow. But Jaren's mind, though lacking the genetic gifts of a chronari, possessed a curious adaptability. He began noticing patterns, feeling an odd resonance deep within himself whenever he visualized certain branching paths. He couldn't see the future like the chronari could, at least not directly, but there were moments when his mere presence seemed to stabilize the swirling illusions in the training chamber. Threads of probability that wavered or flickered would solidify upon contact with his mental focus. One tutor, a soft-spoken chronari named Orishu, remarked on this phenomenon with breathless excitement. "Remarkable," she said, adjusting her scanning device. "Your presence is collapsing the wave of possibilities into a more definite shape. You do not see the future, but you force the illusions to choose a single representation." Jaren found it both unnerving and strangely gratifying. He felt as though the illusions recognized him, bending around him like water around a rock in a stream. In a sense, that was exactly what Kaela had told him. He was a fixed point in the cosmic current. Occasionally, Kaela herself attended these sessions, observing from a balcony above. She would watch as Jaren struggled, offering him words of encouragement when frustration nearly overwhelmed him. It struck him that, for all her regal bearing and cosmic insight, she seemed genuinely invested in his growth, not merely as a tool but as an individual. One afternoon, as the training session concluded, Jaren found himself alone with Kaela. The tutors had left, pleased with the day's progress. He wiped sweat from his brow, noticing the subtle glow of the chamber's crystals reflecting in her eyes. "You learn quickly," she commented. Many Chronari novices take years to gain the clarity you're beginning to show. He chuckled wryly. I'm not sure if that's a compliment or a sign of something unnatural about me. Either way, it's interesting. She stepped closer, folding her hands before her. I wanted you to know that my intelligence agents have been tracking Vorant's activities. He's become more brazen, sending out infiltration teams to test our defenses in the outer sectors. We suspect he's planning a direct strike soon. Jaren frowned. You think he'll come here, to Talarine? She nodded, tension showing in the set of her shoulders. If his goal is to control you, or at least neutralize you, he will come. The question is whether we'll be prepared when he does. He swallowed, glancing at the training apparatus. So these lessons, they're not just theoretical. You want me to be ready for a confrontation. Kaela exhaled softly. Yes, I won't lie to you. If Vorant's forces breach our defenses, your abilities might be our best hope of containing the damage. If he triggers a chronal collapse, the entire capital could be thrown into chaos. Only you might be able to anchor the city, or even the empire, so that reality doesn't unravel. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical burden. He closed his eyes, inhaling. This is way beyond anything I ever asked for. But I get it. If I walk away, it'll still happen. So I might as well do what I can. A small, appreciative smile touched her lips. I'm grateful for your acceptance. I wish circumstances were less dire, that we might approach this with more time and care. But history rarely aligns with our desires. She stepped to the chamber's central console, her fingertips dancing across its surface to deactivate the swirling holo display. As the lights faded, the walls returned to their soft crystalline glow. Take the evening to rest. You've done enough for today. Tomorrow, we'll push into more advanced territory. If you feel ready. He nodded, feeling both weariness and a sense of strange anticipation. The moment she left, he lingered a while, sitting cross-legged on the platform, letting the residual energies fade around him. He tried to process all he had learned, the cosmic significance of time's branching paths, his own role in anchoring them, and the looming threat of Vorant. His mind strayed to how improbable it all seemed. Jaren Hawthorne, a nobody from a forgotten rim world, now found himself courted by an alien empress who saw him as a linchpin of universal order. The absurdity of it almost made him laugh. Yet, he could not deny the truth of what he had witnessed with his own eyes, nor the sincerity in Kaela's. At length, he left the training chamber, following the elegantly lit corridors that led toward his quarters. Along the way, he passed Chronari nobles and servants, some of whom nodded politely, others who gave him curious stares. A few even whispered behind his back, likely speculating about the Empress's new human project. Yet, he did not sense hostility, more cautious fascination. In the privacy of his room, he reviewed the day's teachings on a data tablet, letting the complex diagrams sink into his brain. Every so often, images of swirling timelines appeared in his mind, accompanied by an odd tug in his chest. He wondered if that was the subtle manifestation of his anchoring ability, or just the side effects of focusing on such bizarre concepts. Eventually, fatigue won out. He set aside the tablet, laying back on the bed. As he drifted off, his last conscious thought was of Kaela, her regal bearing, her empathy, and the strange sense of destiny that linked them. A faint, comforting hum seemed to pulse in the air. Like a lullaby from the cosmic currents, he was slowly beginning to understand. Somewhere, in the shadows of a remote laboratory, Lord Vorant's laughter may have echoed, and infiltration teams might have been mobilizing. But for this night, at least, Jaren found a moment of calm. He would need all his strength for the trials that lay ahead. For the Kranari Empire stood on a knife's edge, and time itself was in peril. Dawn broke over Talarine, bathing the crystalline spires in shimmering rays that refracted into prismatic bursts. It was a sight that might have inspired awe had the day's tension not been so palpable. Throughout the city, security alerts had quietly risen to their highest level. Extra guards patrolled the palace corridors, while the air defense network stood at full readiness. Whispers of an imminent assault spread through the populace, though no official statement had been made. Empress Kaela convened her war council in a grand, circular chamber adorned with maps of star systems and swirling temporal charts. Representatives of the Kranari military, influential nobles, and a handful of veteran oracles were present, each wearing an expression of solemn determination. Jaren stood at Kaela's side, a silent observer. The council leader, High General Talmar, a tall Kranari with an ornate uniform and streaks of silver in his hair, began the briefing. Your Radiance, our intelligence indicates that Voran's forces are amassing near the Daenerys sector. Fleet Admiral Rishi confirms multiple vessels bearing Voran's insignia. He seems to be operating openly now, no longer bothering to conceal his allegiances. Kaela's jaw tightened, and our defensive lines. Talmar tapped a console displaying a holographic projection. We've deployed the 7th and 11th fleets to intercept if he attempts to move inward. But given his interest in capturing the anchor, that is, Mr. Hawthorne, there is a strong likelihood he will dispatch infiltration teams directly to the capital, bypassing standard engagements. A wave of murmurs swept through the council. Jaren felt his stomach churn. He was the anchor. They all spoke of an odd mixture of fear and determination filled him. Another council member, Lady Seren, spoke up. We must fortify the palace. If even one infiltration team reaches Jaren, Voranth could force him into cooperation or kill him outright. Either scenario would be catastrophic. Kaela raised a hand for silence. Her voice was calm, yet laced with urgency. Agreed. I propose we shield him in the depths of the palace, perhaps even within the Oracle's maze. That place stands outside normal geometry. Voranth's assassins will have difficulty finding him there. All eyes turned to Jaren, who shifted uncomfortably. I'm willing to do what's needed, he said quietly. But if Voranth's after me, maybe there's a way to use that to our advantage. Kaela's brow arched. You suggest making yourself bait, he shrugged, a wry grin tugging at his lips. Better to face him on our terms than cower in a hidden chamber. Right. If we lure his infiltration teams into a controlled environment, we might capture them, learn more about his plan, maybe even turn the tables. General Talmar seemed skeptical. It's a considerable risk. If we fail, the anchor falls into Voranth's hands. Kaela's gaze flickered from Talmar to Jaren, weighing options. He's right, though. We cannot simply react. Voranth's unpredictability with time manipulation is too great a threat. Let us craft a scenario that appears vulnerable, drawing in his agents. We'll set a trap within the palace's corridors, a place where our advantage is maximum, and their every move can be anticipated by our oracles. The council deliberated quickly, forging a plan to orchestrate a false sense of opportunity for Voranth's infiltration teams. The details were laid out in hushed urgency positions of hidden guard units, the involvement of specialized time-dampening technology, and a carefully choreographed route Jaren would take. When the strategy was finalized, Kaela dismissed the council. She signaled for Jaren to follow her into a smaller side chamber. Once inside, she closed the door, leaving them alone with the faint hum of palace systems. She turned to face him, the tension evident in the fine lines around her eyes. You are brave to volunteer for this, but I want you to know I have no desire to place you in danger needlessly." He met her gaze, a small smile playing at his lips. "Sometimes, meeting danger head-on is the only way to stop it. I've been running my whole life. Maybe it's time I stood my ground." She studied him for a moment, then inclined her head. "Very well. We will carry out the plan tonight, under the cover of darkness. My oracles will attempt to glean the infiltration team's approach, but time manipulation can cloud even their vision. You must remain vigilant." Jaren nodded, feeling his heart thud with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "What about you? Where will you be?" Her voice softened. "I will watch from a secure observation point, guiding the operation. But if things go awry, I will not hesitate to intervene. Voran's threat is too great, and your significance to our future cannot be overstated." He exhaled, pushing back a sudden wave of anxiety. "I understand." They lingered a moment, neither speaking. In the silence, the unspoken bond between them seemed to hum like a live wire, charged with the tension of impending conflict and the fragile hope that victory might still be possible. At length, Kaela broke the silence, stepping closer so that her voice was barely above a whisper. "We stand at the cusp of a turning point. Jaren, if we succeed, we take a great step towards safeguarding the Empire and all who live under its light. If we fail," he finished her sentence in a hushed tone, "there might not be anything left to save." She nodded gravely. Then, placing a hand on his shoulder, she looked into his eyes. "Have courage. Trust in your ability and in mine. Together, we may yet defy the darkest future." With that, she swept past him, leaving the chamber. Jaren was left to collect his thoughts, feeling the weight of the entire empire bearing down on his shoulders. Tonight, the palace's grand corridors would become a battleground, and he would be the centerpiece of a plan that gambled everything on his untested powers and the Empress's prescience. As the day wore on, rumors of an impending threat kept Talarine on edge. Yet no public announcement was made. Kaela refused to sow panic. Instead, she trusted her silent guardians to act when the time came. The city glowed with its usual evening splendor as twilight enveloped the spires. But this night was unlike any other, for somewhere out in the darkness, Voran's shadowy forces prepared to strike. In his quarters, Jaren dressed in light armor provided by the Kronari Guard. It fit surprisingly well, the flexible segments adjusting to his human physique. He practiced drawing a pulse pistol, ensuring he could move freely. A final glance in the mirror revealed a man who looked determined, yet undeniably afraid. Before midnight, a discreet signal summoned him to the designated corridor, where a handful of Kronari operatives awaited, concealed behind hidden panels. The trap was set. Jaren took his position at the center of the corridor, feigning casual movement, as though simply crossing from one wing of the palace to another. His pulse quickened, unseen overhead. Kaela watched through real-time holofeeds, her nerves taut. The oracles whispered updates, scanning for any ripple in the timelines that might signal Voran's strike. The minutes ticked by, a silence so profound it felt suffocating. Then, with the suddenness of a thunderclap, the infiltration teams made their move. The corridor lights flickered ominously. Alarms blared from hidden sensors. Jaren's grip tightened on his weapon. The battle for the anchor, and for time itself, had begun. A hiss of released gas signaled the breach. The corridor's hidden seams split open, revealing a squad of armored assailants. Their suits bore no insignia, but Jaren knew they served Voranth by the practiced coordination of their movements. In seconds, they fanned out, covering all angles of escape. Jaren fought the urge to panic. He fired a warning shot from his pulse pistol, deliberately missing. As predicted, the infiltration team responded in kind, returning fire with lethal precision. Bolts of energy scorched the corridor walls, their blasts throwing sparks of molten crystal into the air. Behind hidden panels, Chronari operatives lurked, awaiting the optimal moment to spring the trap. But the infiltration team was clever. Two of them carried devices that projected a shimmering field across the corridor, jamming standard scanning frequencies. Jaren heard the Oracle's voices crackle in his earpiece. Momentarily scrambled, he dove behind a decorative pillar, inhaling the acrid scent of scorched architecture. His heart hammered in his chest as he realized the infiltration team was better equipped than anticipated. They had come prepared for Chronari tactics. A surge of adrenaline sharpened his senses. Steadying his aim, he popped out from cover, firing on the mercenary who held the jamming device. His pulse bolt struck home, sending the assailant crashing to the floor. For an instant, the jamming field flickered. That was all the opportunity the Chronari operatives needed. Doors slid open on both ends of the corridor, revealing squads of palace guards armed with advanced rifles. The corridor erupted in a storm of energy blasts as the palace defenders poured fire into the infiltrators. Caught in a pincer attack, some of Vorant's agents retreated, only to face Jaren's own shots from the side. Others pivoted, hurling grenades that unleashed concussive waves of sonic force. The walls trembled, shards of crystal raining down. Jaren felt the shockwave rattle through his chest, nearly knocking him off his feet. Yet amid the chaos, he sensed something else, an odd distortion in the air, like a ripple in reality itself. His training in Chronari temporal theory flared in his mind. Could the infiltrators have brought a time manipulation device? Empress, do you see that? He shouted into his earpiece, hoping the channel was clear. Her voice crackled back. Yes, a small temporal disruptor. They're trying to destabilize your immediate surroundings so that your presence is neutralized. Jaren cursed under his breath. So that was Vorant's plan, so localized temporal chaos to weaken his anchoring effect. Already, he felt a strange disorientation creeping around him, as if the corridor was shifting in and out of focus. Rallying his will, Jaren recalled the lessons from the training chamber, how he could consciously exert a stabilizing influence on nearby timelines. He closed his eyes for half a second, an eternity in a firefight, and visualized the swirling illusions of time, focusing on calming them. A wave of warmth emanated from somewhere deep within his chest. The disorientation eased, the corridor snapping back into tangible solidity. He heard one of the infiltrators cry out in surprise clearly. Their disruptor was losing effectiveness. The palace guards seized the advantage, advancing with disciplined volleys. In short order, half the infiltration team lay incapacitated, pinned down, or captured. Yet one figure remained, clad in sleeker armor, moving with uncanny agility. A woman, possibly Chronari, or some augmented species. She dodged and weaved, her weapon spitting precision shots that felled two guards in rapid succession. She made a beeline for Jaren, raising a handheld device that crackled with dark energy, another variant of time manipulation weapon. No doubt. Jaren dove aside as she fired, the blast shattering a decorative column behind him. Swift as a serpent, she closed the distance, swinging the device like a baton. He barely blocked with his forearm, wincing as arcs of black lightning coursed through him, reeling from the impact. Jaren scrambled to his feet, pulse pistol knocked from his grasp. She lunged again, eyes gleaming with fierce determination. Instinct drove him to duck beneath her swing, pivot, and slam his elbow into her side. She staggered, but recovered quickly. A savage grin curled her lips. "Your anchor trick won't save you from a direct strike," she taunted. voice distorted by a helmet modulator. She lunged once more, aiming the crackling device at his torso. Desperate, Jaren focused on that inner warmth again. Time seemed to slow, or rather, he sensed the swirl of possibilities around him. A fraction of a second before the blow landed, he twisted aside, letting the device graze his armor instead of striking flesh. Sparks flew, the armor plating fracturing under the assault, but he remained unscathed. Before she could recover, Jaren planted a firm kick to her midsection, knocking her backward. She staggered, losing grip on the device, which skittered across the floor, deactivating. In that moment, Chronari guards surged forward, tackling her with a combined effort, wrestling her to the ground. Panting, Jaren surveyed the corridor. The infiltration team was neutralized, either dead or incapacitated. The jamming field had dropped entirely, and behind him, palace guards were already securing the corridor. He realized, with a rush of relief, that their trap had worked. Jaren, Kaela's voice called from the far end of the corridor. He turned to see the Empress striding toward him, accompanied by General Talmar and a contingent of heavily armed guards. She looked relieved, concerned, but triumphant. He managed a shaky grin. They won't be giving us trouble anytime soon. Kaela's gaze swept over the fallen infiltrators, pausing at the one who had attacked Jaren. We'll interrogate them. Find out how Vorinth planned to use these devices. A guard approached, saluting briskly. My Empress, the infiltration is contained, but we have multiple casualties among our forces. We also received reports of attempted breaches in other wings. Although those squads fled once they realized the assault had failed. Kaela nodded solemnly. See to the wounded at once, and secure all critical palace infrastructure. Good work. As the guard hurried off, she turned to Jaren, placing a hand on his shoulder. I sensed the temporal disruptions from the observation room. You countered them, didn't you? He shrugged, still catching his breath. I tried. It seemed to work, though I was winging it. She smiled, a rare warmth lighting her expression. You did well, anchoring us. This is a victory, albeit a small one. Now Vorinth knows we're prepared. Perhaps he'll think twice before launching another incursion. Jaren looked at the captured infiltrators, a knot tightening in his stomach. And if he doesn't, Kaela's eyes hardened. Then we continue to fight, with all the means at our disposal. But this day proves that we have a chance, that your ability and our resources can stand against him. In the corridor's flickering emergency lights, they shared a moment of mutual respect. The cosmic weight of their alliance felt a fraction lighter. Through cooperation, they had thwarted a direct attack on the anchor, preserving the timeline for another day. Yet in the back of Jaren's mind lingered a silent question. Had Vorinth planned this assault only to gauge their defenses, to learn about Jaren's capabilities firsthand? If so, the real battle might be yet to come. For now, though, he allowed himself a moment of relief. Standing amidst the smoking ruins of a corridor turned battlefield, glad simply to be alive, and strangely proud of the improbable role he had come to play in the grand designs of the Chronari Empire. Days turned into weeks, and though Vorinth did not launch another overt attack on Talarine, the Empire remained on high alert. The infiltration team's interrogation revealed disturbing intelligence. They spoke of a weapon under construction, a device capable of localizing a temporal collapse and expanding it outward. In the palace's secure war room, the council studied the data with grim faces. Holographic diagrams of Vorinth's contraption flickered, showing arcs of chronal distortion looping around a crystalline core. The oracles indicated that, once activated, this device could tear open the time stream, twisting entire regions of space into paradoxical knots. Empress Kaela stood at the center of the war room, her posture poised yet tense. "We cannot allow this device to be completed," she declared, voice echoing. A single localized collapse could spread into the chronal flow of the Empire, potentially unraveling centuries of established timelines. Jaren, standing beside her, studied the projections with a sinking feeling. "Where is he building it?" General Talmar stepped forward, pointing to a star map. "Based on the infiltration team's data, we suspect a secret facility on the mining world of Vasir. That planet is mostly abandoned, with a harsh environment that would conceal large-scale construction." Lady Seren added, "Our scouts attempted a reconnaissance pass, but the star system is heavily guarded. Voranth's ships maintain a tight perimeter." Kaela's gaze swept the room. "Then we must act swiftly. We will assemble a strike force. We will destroy this device before it can destabilize reality." And Jaren, she turned to him, a touch of urgency in her eyes. "Your presence is essential. The device will be designed to manipulate or break time, and only your anchoring effect can shield our forces from those distortions." He met her gaze, steel in his voice. "Then let's do it. No sense waiting for Voranth to finish what he started." A ripple of determination spread through the war room. They began planning the assault, a coordinated effort involving Chronari fleets, specialized ground teams, and the oracles who could sense fluctuations in the timeline. Jaren's role would be pivotal. He would accompany the strike team to disrupt or counter any time manipulation aimed against them. 2 days later, a small but elite task force departed Talarine, their ships cloaked in advanced stealth technology. Jaren rowed aboard the Sunspear, a sleek frigate renowned for its infiltration capabilities. Kaela commanded the operation from the flagship Eternal Vantage, which hung in the sector's shadows, awaiting the signal to engage. As they neared Vasir, tension filled the corridors of the Sunspear. Jaren double-checked his gear, the training in Chronari time theory echoing in his mind. He glanced at a viewport, seeing the distant star glimmer over the planet's scarred surface. Vasir had once been rich in exotic minerals, but decades of strip mining had left it a barren, storm-racked husk, perfect for secret operations and perfect for Voranth's final gambit. When the infiltration teams landed, they found the planet's terrain as inhospitable as rumored. Razor-sharp rock formations jutted from swirling dust storms. Lightning arsed across the sky in brilliant flashes of blue-white. The strike force advanced cautiously, guided by readings from the oracles who detected pockets of temporal distortion high above. Chronari warships moved into position, prepared to engage Voranth's fleet the moment the infiltration team disabled critical defenses. The plan was elegant, relying on precise coordination, but in matters of time manipulation, nothing was guaranteed. As Jaren and his squad navigated treacherous canyons, they came upon Voranth's facility, a sprawling compound of gleaming towers and domed structures. Energy shields rippled around it, refracting the dust-laden winds into prismatic glitters. Jaren felt a subtle tingle at the base of his skull, a warning that the device they sought was active at some capacity. Their approach did not go unnoticed for long. Automated turrets whirred to life, spewing plasma bolts that scorched the rock formations. Jaren dove for cover behind a jagged outcrop, returning fire while Chronari troopers advanced with energy shields. The crackle of weaponry mingled with the roar of distant thunder. Then came the telltale distortion. The air around them shimmered as if seen through a heat haze, and some of the troopers cried out in confusion, their perceptions fracturing. Jaren recognized it a localized time warp, likely an early test of the device's capabilities. Concentrating, he summoned the calm center within himself, projecting it outward. The distortions lessened, enough for the troopers to regain focus. He heard someone shout, "Keep close to the anchor," and felt a surge of responsibility. He steadied his breath, focusing on each step, each breath, anchoring not just himself, but the entire squad to a stable timeline. Under his influence, the infiltration team pushed forward, neutralizing the automated turrets. Soon, they reached the facility's outer airlock, where Chronari engineers began hacking the controls. The swirl of dust storms raged behind them, the sky lit by near-constant lightning. Just as they breached the airlock, an alarm rang through the compound, echoing off metal corridors. Voices barked orders over loudspeakers in an alien language, presumably Vorinth's private militia or coerced scientists. The infiltration team pressed on, sweeping through dimly lit halls, meeting pockets of resistance. Jaren's pulse pistol hummed with each shot, picking off defenders who tried to block their advance. All the while, the sense of time distortion grew stronger, pulling at the edges of his consciousness. It was as if the facility itself existed slightly out of phase, each corridor a potential labyrinth of twisted reality. At last, they reached a massive chamber, high ceilings arched over a colossal device that pulsed with arcs of shimmering energy. Dozens of cables snaked across the floor, connecting generators, conduits, and focusing crystals. At the center stood a column of swirling luminescence, a vortex of compressed temporal power. Even from across the chamber, Jaren felt its oppressive aura. "By the cosmos," muttered a Chronari trooper, eyes wide with awe and dread. Jaren's heart pounded. That's it, isn't it? The device that can collapse time. A new voice echoed from the far side of the chamber. Indeed, it is. From the shadows emerged Lord Vorinth, clad in a sleek black suit that radiated power. At his side stood a cadre of guards armed with advanced weaponry. His golden eyes glowed with a manic fervor. Empress Kaela's lapdog arrives at last. Vorinth sneered, eyes settling on Jaren. So you're the anchor they all whisper about. The meddler in time. Jaren swallowed, gripping his weapon. You're the one risking the destruction of everything, just to seize power. Vorinth's laugh reverberated through the chamber. Power is a means, not an end. I seek the next evolution of the Chronari to transcend time, to reshape destiny. You call it destruction. I call it rebirth. A hush fell as Vorinth raised his hand toward the vortex. Once I complete the final activation, this device will unravel the old paths, and from the wreckage, I shall forge a new empire, an empire immune to the illusions of prescience, led by one who truly commands time. The infiltration team aimed their weapons, but Vorinth's guards responded with swift, deadly fire. Shots roared across the chamber, sparks dancing in the swirling glow of the vortex. Jaren dove behind a console, returning fire as best he could. Still, Vorinth stood near the device's control panel, shielded by an energy barrier that deflected the blasts. The swirling vortex expanded, crackling with arcs of lightning that lanced out to scorch the chamber walls. Time distortions rippled outward, causing some troopers to vanish momentarily, only to reappear in disorientated states. Jaren felt the currents of reality strain under Vorinth's manipulations, clenching his fists. Jaren focused on his anchoring ability. Warmth surged from deep within him, pushing back against the vortex's chaotic pull around him. The infiltration team steadied, their presence no longer flickering. Yet the device's power was immense, and he sensed he could not hold the line of stability alone for long. He locked eyes with Vorinth, who smirked, as though amused by Jaren's defiance. You cannot stop me, Anchor. This is beyond your mortal comprehension. Submit, and I might preserve a place for you in the new timeline. Jaren's response was a shot aimed straight at Vorinth's barrier, though it failed to penetrate. I'd rather take my chances in this one. Vorinth sneered, flipping a switch on the console. The vortex roared, sending out a shockwave that rattled the entire facility. Walls groaned, and cables sparked with overload. Alarms blared stridently. Outside, the Krenari fleet moved in response. Kaela, aboard the flagship, felt the ripple in the time stream. Her oracles cried out, their visions clouded by Vorinth's cataclysmic attempt to bend reality. She ordered the fleets to commence bombardment on the facility's outer defenses. But that alone might not suffice. Within the chamber, the infiltration team struggled to gain ground, pinned by relentless guard fire. Jaren, kneeling behind the console, realized the only way to stop Vorinth was to destroy the device's core. But the console was shielded, and the vortex's energies were too volatile. Gritting his teeth, he mustered every bit of focus, pushing his anchoring effect beyond his immediate vicinity. He envisioned the swirling illusions of time, the fractal branching of possibilities. If he could direct that stabilizing force against the device, perhaps it would disrupt its synchronization, short-circuiting its meltdown. But first, he needed to get closer. Adrenaline pounded through Jaren's veins as he broke cover, rolling across the floor to a fallen trooper's position. Energy blasts rained down around him, but luck fate, his innate ability seemed to shield him. Krenari operatives covered him, firing suppressive shots at Vorinth's guards. Time seemed to slow in Jaren's mind as he made a mad dash toward the device's central platform, his feet pounding against the metal floor. The swirling vortex loomed overhead, arcs of energy lashing out like the tentacles of some cosmic leviathan. "Stop him," Vorinth snarled, unleashing a barrage of temporal distortions. The air before Jaren rippled, illusions of multiple futures colliding in disorienting flashes. He saw glimpses of himself dying, glimpses of Vorinth triumphant, glimpses of entire star systems winking out of existence. The illusions threatened to overwhelm him. But Jaren clung to his training, focusing on that anchor within. The illusions snapped apart, replaced by the immediate reality of the chamber. He pressed forward, reaching the device's central generator, a towering cylinder filled with roiling, incandescent plasma. He felt the pull of energy, a gravitational undertow of time itself. Summoning his strength, he pressed his hand against the generator's surface. Instantly, a jolt of power coursed through his arm, threatening to fling him back, but he held on, letting the current flow around him. He pictured a calm center in a hurricane, the stable axis of a spinning world. The device's swirling energies battered his senses, searching for a way to break him. Yet, as he steadied his mind, the swirl began to slow, the vortex's expansions faltering. Vorinth realized what was happening, and with a furious shout, he abandoned the console. Leaping forward, he slammed into Jaren, knocking him away from the generator. They tumbled to the floor in a clash of limbs. Vorinth's eyes blazed with otherworldly light. "You dare undo my masterpiece," he hissed, seizing Jaren by the throat, attempting to choke the life out of him. Waves of temporal distortion radiated from Vorinth's grip, warping the surrounding space. Jaren felt his vision blur, saw multiple versions of the scene layered atop one another. In some, he saw himself lose consciousness. In others, he saw a blade at Vorinth's throat. Reality wavered, uncertain, refusing to yield. He summoned his last reserves of will. Grappling with Vorinth, he slammed a forearm into the renegade's chest, forcing him back a few inches. In that brief respite, he locked eyes with Vorinth. "We all exist in time," Jaren said, voice strained. "But I'm something you can't bend." Focusing his anchor ability, he sent a powerful stabilizing pulse through Vorinth's body, shocking his manipulative hold on the timeline. Vorinth recoiled, coughing, as though the anchor's energy burned him from within. Seizing the moment, Jaren wrestled himself free, rolling aside just as Cronari troopers arrived to subdue Vorinth. The guards pinned him, forcibly removing a device strapped to his arm, likely the source of his enhanced temporal manipulations. With Vorinth restrained, Jaren staggered to his feet, rubbing his bruised throat. The swirling vortex overhead still churned, albeit less violently. Sparks showered the chamber from overloaded consoles. Through the chaos, he spotted the generator's core, still pulsing with destructive potential. A voice crackled over the comlink Kaela's. "Jaren, do you read? We sense the vortex weakening, but it remains active. It could still trigger a collapse if not stabilized or destroyed." He glanced around, seeing Cronari engineers moving in, guided by the oracles. "We'll try to shut it down," he shouted, voice raspy from Vorinth's grip. Approaching the generator once more, he and the engineers worked frantically to cut the power feeds, removing the focusing crystals that channeled temporal energy. At first, the vortex resisted every measure, arcs of lightning lashing out as though defending itself. But Jaren stayed close, projecting his anchor effect, preventing the swirling energies from reasserting total chaos. Bit by bit, they dismantled the device's critical systems. The vortex's color changed from violent purple to a dim, sullen red. At last, with a final hiss of vented plasma, it collapsed inward, leaving the chamber quiet but for the crackle of damaged electronics. A hush fell over everyone present, broken only by the thud of Vorinth's guards surrendering and the ragged breaths of the Cronari troopers. Jaren let his shoulders sag, relief flooding through him. They had done it. The device lay inert, and Vorinth's ambition to remake time had been thwarted. As the infiltration team secured the chamber, Kaela arrived in person, leading a detachment of her elite guard. Her expression was one of solemn triumph. She approached Jaren, glancing at the unconscious Vorinth, who now lay in restraints. "It is over," she said softly, though caution tempered her tone. "You have saved us." Jaren, he shook his head, still catching his breath, couldn't have done it alone. She offered a gentle smile, then turned to her troopers. "Secure this facility. Ensure the device remains dismantled. Transport Vorinth to the flagship for trial. Our empire shall see justice served." As the troopers moved to comply, Kaela locked eyes with Jaren. For a moment, the gravity of their shared journey settled around them. In that silent exchange, they acknowledged the burdens each had carried the Empress, with her people's future in her visions, and the wanderer who had become a key to saving reality. Within the hour, the strike force withdrew from the ravaged facility. The Cronari fleet, freed from the threat of Vorinth's weapon, easily scattered his loyalist ships. By the time the last dust storm rolled over Vasir's surface, the entire operation concluded in the Empire's favor. That night, aboard the Eternal Vantage, a subdued celebration took place among the High Command. They rejoiced in the fact that the Cronari Empire no longer stood on the brink of temporal collapse. Yet a deeper understanding colored their moods. Time was delicate, and even with Vorinth defeated, the danger of cosmic forces remained. Alone with Jaren in a quiet observation deck, Kaela stared out at the star-speckled void. "The Empire owes you a debt it can never fully repay. You have anchored us, not just in this battle, but in the hearts of all who doubted humanity's worth." He leaned against the railing, gazing at her profile illuminated by starlight. "I never wanted to be anyone's savior, but I can't deny this path led me here. Maybe I was supposed to be your anchor." She nodded slowly, the corners of her lips curving into a gentle smile. "And perhaps I was meant to open your eyes to a greater destiny." They stood in companionable silence, each wrestling with the truths revealed by their struggle. The future was still unwritten, but it no longer seemed clouded by the immediate threat of annihilation. Instead, it gleamed with possibilities of alliances, of exploration, and of deeper bonds that transcended species. When the Eternal Vantage finally set a course back to Talareen, it carried an empire's newfound hope and a human wanderer whose presence would be forever entwined with Kronari fate. Weeks later, the Kronari capital erupted in celebration. Not the raucous festivities of old, but a gentle, dignified jubilee that recognized the Empire's narrow escape from a calamity of cosmic scale. The palace opened its gates to dignitaries from distant worlds, including human envoys, who arrived to forge new ties with the Kronari. In the throne room, Empress Kaela presided over a formal ceremony, flanked by her oracles and high-ranking officials. She received ambassadors, knights, and luminaries in a steady procession. At her side stood Jaren Hawthorne, dressed in refined Kronari regalia, an unprecedented gesture of unity between the Empire and a human anchor. A hush fell as Kaela lifted her voice to address the assembly. Citizens of the Empire and esteemed friends from across the stars, we gather here in gratitude and in faith that our future remains bright. Thanks to the courage and resolve of many, we stand unbroken against the threats that sought to unmake us. She extended a hand toward Jaren, who stepped forward, heart pounding with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. None have exemplified this valor more than Jaren Hawthorne, whose innate gift anchored our reality against Vorant's designs. Therefore, it is my honor to declare him an ally, a guardian of the Empire, and a symbol of hope for all who traverse the cosmic seas. A ripple of applause spread through the throne room. Jaren bowed his head, scarcely believing how far he had come from his days piloting a ragged starship through lonely frontiers. He saw the grateful faces of Kronari nobles, soldiers, and ordinary citizens who recognized that his presence had saved them from unimaginable doom. After the ceremony, Kaela guided him to a private terrace overlooking Talareen, where the city's crystalline towers shone in the brilliant light of twin suns. She rested a hand lightly on his arm. "This is not merely an ending, Jaren," she said, her voice tinged with quiet elation. "It is the start of a new age for the Kronari and for humanity. With Vorant's trial behind us and the device dismantled, our worlds can join in dialogue. Your people need not fear our prescience, and we need not fear your unpredictability. Instead, we can learn from each other," he smiled, inhaling the sweet air perfumed by alien blossoms. "I'd like that. I've seen enough chaos. Building something better seems like a worthy pursuit." They stood there, content in each other's company, the weight of the Empire's future settling more gently across their shoulders. Somewhere in the cosmos, the ripple effects of their alliance continued, forging new pathways of understanding and cooperation between worlds. For Kaela and Jaren, the journey had been fraught with danger, but it ended in a hopeful dawn. No longer bound by fear of unraveling timelines, the Kronari could once again look forward, guided by a vision of unity. And Jaren Hawthorne, rogue pilot, frontier drifter, unexpected anchor of reality, at last found a purpose that resonated beyond the confines of any single star system. Thus did the Empress and the Wanderer stand on the threshold of infinite futures, hand in hand, ready to face whatever wonders and challenges yet lay in store, secure in the knowledge that, together, they had shaped a brighter destiny for all.